Are you having problems filing an I-130 petition for your father? Have you been told it can't be done because your parents weren't married? It is complicated, but it's not impossible. You have to prove that you had a bona fide familial relationship with each other, okay? If this is a father who had adopted you, then you have to have had that adoption be finalized, and you had to have lived with him for 2 years by the time you turned 16. If this is a stepfather, you have to show that the marriage that created that step relationship occurred before you were 18. And you're also going to have to prove that marriage between mom and your stepfather was valid, which means you're going to show some proof, kind of like you do with a marriage case for yourself. Let's say you're petitioning for your wife or your husband. You're going to have to prove that the relationship that created this step relationship was, and preferably continues to be, valid. It doesn't have to continue to be, but it's better if it is. It's just easier. But let's say it's your biological father and your parents were never married. And let's say his name's not on the birth certificate. There's a lot of reasons women decide not to put the father's name on the birth certificate. Maybe he was a ne'er-do-well. Maybe, I hope not, but maybe this is a child who was born of a rape. Or he was just, nobody liked him. And as soon as he found out that he was going to be a daddy, he took off for the capital. For whatever reason, the father's name is not on the birth certificate. So you're going to have to prove that before you turn 21, you had a relationship with this guy. Now, how do you do that? It depends on whether or not he was around while you were little. Sometimes in the scenario I just gave you, where he found out he's going to be a father and he took off, and you never had any relationship with him, like at all, ever, and then when you become a U.S. citizen, you're a successful engineer, doctor, lawyer, whatever you are up here in the States, he shows up again. That's going to be very difficult to prove. Because one, there's going to be no photographs of you together. Those little things, those photographs for birthdays, dad holding the baby, photographs at Christmas, photographs for birthdays, they're important evidence. If his name is not on the birth certificate, double check and see if his name is on the baptismal certificate. If you can either do it yourself or you can have somebody back home, go to the church where you were baptized. If you don't actually have the baptismal certificate, it would be better coming from the church anyway. Go to the church and have them create a document that says, this is the baptismal record that we have for him. The mother's name is this, the father's name is that. He was baptized on such and such a day at such and such a location. Make sure it's got all the little seals and the ribbons and all that stuff. But a baptismal certificate works well. And that one of the reasons that it works well is because they don't have anything to gain by this. Okay, we're going to talk at the end about why people lie and how they lie. And why the consular officer is very suspicious of these types of cases. Another way that you can prove physical and emotional bonds is through social media, email, letters. If, maybe dad was out of the country and he sent letters back. And those letters can be something, And those letters can be something as simple as birthday cards or Christmas cards. If you can get phone records showing that there's phone calls back and forth between the families, that's a possibility. Another thing from my own personal experience as an attorney is that a lot of times the father has gone up to the States or he's gone to some other country. He's left the area. But his children continued to have a close relationship with his mother and his father and his siblings. So that's going to count for a lot. Another way you can show that there was a relationship is if you can prove financial support on the part of the father to the children. I've had clients who have saved every receipt for every time they've sent money back home via Western Union or some other method. That's very important, particularly if they put in the little memo section, this is for Junior. Very important. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but the consular officers are very suspicious of this stuff. So if he's sending money back to his mother, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's for his child, even if his mother spent it on the child. Legal declarations. What's that? They're just affidavits. You go to a lawyer or a notary if you're in Latin America, and you make up affidavits. That can be made up by the mother who says, yes, Pedro always sent money every week, every 2 weeks, once a month. He sent money to support Junior. Or affidavits from the grandmother, or affidavits from a lot of times what my clients would do is that they knew people going back home, people who were legally here who could travel back and forth. And instead of sending it through a wire transfer, he would just give his friend, here's $500, give that to my wife, because they always call them my wife, even though they weren't married. Give that to my wife for the kids. So any one of those people, the more the merrier, by the way, can write affidavits about how, yes, he did send financial support. I'm not sure about one of the things that I Googled, and it said, well, health insurance records. That might be true for Europeans. It's not true for most of my clientele who are from Latin America. But if there's any kind of health insurance documents where the father listed the child as his son or his daughter, that's great proof. Another thing is if he was there, let's say he didn't leave until Junior was 7 or 8 years old, he might be listed on Junior's school records or on his medical records. Either you as the U.S. citizen or somebody back home on your behalf can go and ask the pediatrician, the doctor, the clinic, or the school where he went for elementary school to show that, yes, Dad was listed as an emergency contact. It's all good proof. And again, just like with the church and the baptismal certificates, it's especially good proof because they don't have any reason to lie about this stuff. It's not going to help them in any way. I know this sounds like a lot of work. Like, I can't go back to my school. What? But the school's probably still there. These are things that you can do, and you should make every effort to do them. Photographs are only going to get you so far. Self-serving affidavits are only going to get you so far. So the more neutral evidence you have, the better. Another thing not to be forgotten is your affidavit. You should write a long affidavit, which is basically just a statement, write it chronologically. This is my first memory of my father. Write it chronologically. Let's say you're a guy that your dad had come up to the States, and you never really knew him, and then you come up at 17, and you go to wherever he is, and you reunite with him. All of that should be included in a long affidavit as to how you reunited with your father from your first memory to your most recent memory. The father can also write an affidavit. The mother can also write an affidavit. The grandmother can write an affidavit. But yours should probably be the longest. And I always think it's important to put as much emotional evidence into those affidavits as possible. How did it feel growing up without a father? For some people, it wasn't that bad because I had uncles and aunts, his brothers and his mom and dad. I was over every Sunday. I went to their house for dinner. Or for other people, it was devastating that they didn't have a father. And when you came up here and you finally met him, you weren't too thrilled about it. The only reason you met him was because your mother insisted, well, he's in Philadelphia, you should meet your father. And that's when you got to know him, and you realized that he didn't want to not be with you. He was up here making money, or whatever the story is. Which leads me to probably the most important thing about this. Don't lie. Okay? Don't make something up. And don't listen to notarios, because they will tell you to lie. They will tell you, in fact, I hate to say it, I'm embarrassed to say it, but there are some attorneys that will tell you the same thing. Make sure that you include A, B, C, and D in your affidavit. Well, if C and D didn't really happen, they're going to say, don't worry about it. Nobody's going to know. Listen, don't lie, because USCIS adjudicators are very suspicious of these types of cases. If the guy's name is not on your birth certificate, then who knows who the father is? Let me give you one scenario which plays out, I think, on a fairly regular basis. Let's say you've come up to the States, you've gotten legal, you've become a U.S. citizen. Meanwhile, mom has been involved with a guy that she's known since they were kids. They've known each other all this time. And at this point, she's been in a 20-year relationship with this guy. She loves this guy. You're going to petition for mom to come up here because you feel, as a dutiful son or daughter, that you need to bring mom up. Well, she doesn't want to leave the guy that she's been involved with. So somebody comes up with the brilliant idea of, well, why don't we just say that he really is your father? I'll write an affidavit about it. My mom will write an affidavit about it. My sisters will write an affidavit about it. You should write an affidavit, son, about how you've always known that this guy was your father. Really play it up. Play it up. Well, guess what? If the consular officer isn't buying this, they're going to require a DNA test. That's not good. That's not good, because that's going to come up with not the father. And you might be able to backpedal and say, I was always told he was the father. I thought he was the father. But good luck now with mom's petition, because you think these things aren't cross-referenced. They are. And she made a misrepresentation of a material fact on another case. It's a mess. It's a mess. I had a client who, he was the father, he had 2 daughters. Or he said he had 2 daughters. He was the father of the younger one. But the older one was not his. I don't know what he did or how he did it. It was way before I got involved. They were still back in their home country in Central America. And he went and changed the vital records, vital statistics. I don't know if he paid somebody to change the birth certificate, or if he just said, I'm coming forward after 12 years to admit that I am the father of this child. Which, then the girls come up. The girls come up. The eldest could have had a very strong case as an unaccompanied minor because she had been abandoned by her father. But you couldn't do it because this, really a stepfather, this guy had already changed the birth record saying that, no, I'm the father. So now she's not unaccompanied. It's like, you don't think you're smarter than all these people, okay? Do not think that you can just finesse your way through this, because you probably can't. Because in the end, if there's any doubt whatsoever, they're going to say, I want a DNA test. And now you're screwed. So if you can get past, legitimately, if you can get past proving that you did have a relationship, it might not have been the best relationship, but you have some photos of you when you were a newborn, or you were 2, you were 3, and then he came up to the States or he went to some other country, and you've got a couple of Western Union receipts. You've got some affidavits from people. You've got the baptismal certificate that says, yeah, he's the father. You can do this. A lot of people think you can't do it at all. If they weren't married, you can't do it. That's not true. You can. You can. But I always say, when you're giving evidence about something, have this be for a marriage case or in a situation like this. Give them as much evidence as you possibly can. Make it impossible for them to say no. But don't lie. That's it for right now, and I'll see you next time.